Hello everyone and welcome back. Today I'd like to review Dolmen. It's a futuristic combat game where you'll battle against monsters that have taken over a planet. Your task is to collect special stones called Dolmen and clear the monsters. This review is based on a completion of the first level and a partial completion of the second level across about 15 hours. You're all busy people, so let me answer your most pressing question first. Are you going to enjoy it? The 30-second spiel is that this is a game that openly tries to emulate the Dark Souls experience, but in a futuristic setting. Unlike most games set in a technological advanced future, the gameplay is primarily focused on melee combat. Ranged weapons do exist, but they're secondary to melee. Most of the mechanics in Dolmen are closely based on Dark Souls. You collect nanites by killing monsters to upgrade your abilities. Monsters will also drop resources that you can use to craft and upgrade your gear. There's a variety of different classes to suit different playstyles, and different types of gear to match. There's bosses to challenge your fighting skills. It also has the same bonfire mechanics and revolver mechanics as Dark Souls, and its own version of Estus flasks. This game is designed to appeal to people who enjoy Souls-like gameplay. So if that sounds like something you'd like, then stay with me and I'll delve deeper into the details. The backstory of the game is that humanity has discovered Dolmen, a unique crystal that allows barriers between dimensions to be breached. Of course humanity misuses it, and of course that leads to an interdimensional invasion. The planet where experiments on Dolmen were being conducted is overrun by a variety of monsters. And of course it's up to you to venture down and collect as much Dolmen as possible. Dolmen is a game that follows John Carmack's adage that story in a game is like story in a porn movie. It's expected to be there, but it's not that important. Background information is provided to you by cutscenes and information drops, but you won't be playing because of the story. It's all about the gameplay that he aims to give the player. The simplest way to understand the gameplay is that it aims to be like Dark Souls in almost every way. Just like Dark Souls, you explore handcrafted levels while fighting enemies. The environment is generally like what you'd expect from a futuristic facility. Other environments regularly make appearances, and this is justified in-game by Dolmen's ability to breach the barriers between universes. There's also environmental hazards and verticality matters, because you will take damage or die from falling. The level design encourages exploration by having little side passages and ledges that hold rewards. You'll also be able to unlock shortcuts that will allow you to move faster through areas that you've already explored. Enemies are hand-placed and ambushes happen frequently. Observation is rewarded, as you can often spot enemies before they can spring their surprise. Kills will grant you nanites that you can use to upgrade your attributes, and they'll also drop random pieces of loot. And yes, when you die your nanites will be where you last died and can be retrieved just like in Dark Souls. Since this is a game about combat, it's worth paying a fair bit of attention to that. Melee is the centerpiece of the game. You have your typical light and strong attacks doing more damage but being slower and exposing you to more risk. You'll have a ranged weapon that will supplement your melee attacks. You can block and dodge to avoid damage, all fairly standard. One thing that will stand out is that the attacks follow the Dark Souls pattern of being slower and non-interruptible. The same deliberate planning is required because once you start a swing, you won't be able to interrupt it. Enemies also follow this pattern, so it's not so much about reflexes as much as it's about knowing your enemy and planning around their behavior. Alongside health, you also have stamina, which limits how much you can attack and dodge. One idiosyncrasy about the game is that the character will not automatically face in the direction the camera is facing, and you have to take that into account when attacking and blocking. This is especially problematic when enemies get very close. Dodging and maintaining distance while timing your attacks seems to be the better approach, rather than trying to defeat enemies in one flurry. Aside from stamina and health, you also have energy. When you fire your ranged weapon, it'll use up energy. If you fire light shots, the energy will regenerate over time, but if you fire heavy shots, it will cause more damage but permanently deplete your energy. Healing also causes you to permanently sacrifice energy for health. When you deplete your energy, you can use batteries, the game's version of Estus flasks, to recover energy. Just like Estus flasks, it takes time to consume a battery, so there's tactical thinking required when using them. Fundamentally, the use of energy as ammunition for your guns means that they can't be your only weapon. You'll eventually be forced to use melee, which is why I highlight that the gameplay is melee-centric. Every so often you'll come across beacons, which are the game's equivalent of bonfires. You can use them to replenish your batteries, or to access upgrades and crafting. Once you've unlocked each beacon, you can fast travel between them. Enemies will come back to life when you use the beacons, and if you die you'll respawn at the last one you used. There's different varieties of enemies, but typically they fall into melee and ranged types. Bosses also exist, and they tend to mirror Dark Souls bosses by being physically bigger than you and having area of effect attacks. It does seem that Dolmen bosses are more forgiving than Dark Souls bosses. Their attacks seem to be slower and actually avoidable without having to literally memorize their attack patterns through repeatedly dying. Having said that, I've played Dark Souls a fair bit, so it could easily be the case that Dolmen simply seems easier now that I'm familiar with the Dark Souls approach to design. Overall, enemies seem to be fair. You'll still have to get familiar with them, but they follow the same rules as the player. Their attacks will not suddenly change direction just because you dodged too early. If they run into environmental hazards, they'll take damage and even die. If you push them off the ledge, they'll take the same falling damage you do. Bosses don't have those jump attacks that immediately bring them within melee range. The developers didn't resort to cheese in order to make the game more difficult, for the sake of making it more difficult. Obviously the key question is whether all the components of gameplay come together in a way that will satisfy Dark Souls fans. That's a very subjective judgment, unfortunately, and I tend to prefer to focus on the objective qualities that a game's design offers. Whether Dolmen's gameplay is emotionally appealing to a player is something that is ultimately personal opinion. But since I've compared Dolmen to Dark Souls so much, I'll make an exception in this case. My personal opinion is that the boss fights may not satisfy Dark Souls fans because they seem to lack the visual spectacle that Dark Souls bosses have in their form and the flashiness of their attacks. But in terms of gameplay, I found the boss attacks to be less cheesy, so from that perspective I like them better than I like Dark Souls bosses. Having said that, the Queen, the boss at the end of the first chapter, is a bit cheesy and has lots of attacks you have to memorize, so it may be the case that bosses become cheesier as you progress through the game. When you first create your character, you'll be able to choose from one of several templates that will give you benefits to a particular playstyle. But ultimately, the class you choose doesn't matter because the differences will become irrelevant after a few levels. The primary way to shape your character to suit your playstyle is by attributes. You need to spend nanites to upgrade, and each upgrade costs progressively more than the last one. Improving attributes gives bonuses according to which attribute you upgraded. So for instance, if you upgrade your constitution, you'll get more hit points. More endurance means more stamina. Upgrading your energy gives you more energy and increases your natural resistances, and so on. In order to progress, you'll have to craft gear, which requires components collected from dead enemies and received from various people you meet while exploring. Just like in Dark Souls, you may have to grind the level several times to get the nanites and components you need to get the gear you want. Different weapons behave differently, so you have your typical fast attack, low damage weapons, and on the opposite end, you have your slow attack, high damage weapons. As you might expect, gear also has minimum attribute requirements that you have to meet before using them. You can also apply bonuses by adding special components to your slots. One unique aspect about the gear is that each piece of equipment corresponds to one of 3 tech groups. These groups give you bonuses depending on how many pieces of gear you're using from that group, and it provides an extra parameter to take into account when deciding how to outfit yourself. Many of the bonuses skew towards melee bonuses, which again accentuates the melee focus of combat. Ultimately, you can shape your character to suit your playstyle by the attributes you upgrade and the gear you craft. In case it wasn't obvious yet, Dolmen is a game that draws heavily from Dark Souls. This inspiration affects every facet of the game, from the way levels are laid out to the way combat works. To some people this will be a positive, and to some it'll be a negative. It's also highly subjective as to whether the individual components come together to give Dark Souls fans the same emotional attachment that they might have to Dark Souls. But ultimately, if Dark Souls is a game you enjoy and want more of the same, then Dolmen may be something you might want to look into. Thanks for watching all the way to the end. Let me know what you thought about it in the comments. Feel free to leave a like, subscribe and hit the bell button to be notified when new videos come out. See you soon.